Hello, everyone. Welcome back. On today's episode of the Pinnacle podcast, we have CEO Justin Knott of Intrepy with us. Welcome, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about being on and the topic that we're talking about today.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be great. Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you. So, tell us a little bit about Intrepy, how you guys got started, and then kind of how you grew.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Intrepy Healthcare Marketing, we are a award-winning full-service marketing agency specifically focused in healthcare, but even more specifically on the medical side of healthcare. So we have been around for closing in on 10 years. And really since day one, we have specialized in helping multi-location, multi-physician specialty practices, both surgical and non-surgical, reach new patients. So doing that through storytelling, helping them position themselves high in search rankings, helping them leverage paid advertising, really all of the different components that you need as a practice to put together a really effective marketing strategy and then hit patients on kind of that whole care continuum. And it's definitely evolved. We were actually born out of what we call offline marketing, which was, if people are familiar with it, physician liaison marketing, or essentially what's kind of building physician referrals, very kind of networking style, grassroots, boots on the ground, which I think was really important for us. We still do that. My wife, who is the other co-founder of the agency, has one of the only online training courses. So that's definitely evolved. But I think that was really fundamental in not only kind of why we focused in healthcare, but on top of that gave us, I think, more insights than a lot of healthcare focused marketing agencies, having really seen the whole patient journey
Yeah.
from start to finish. And like actually seeing surgeries and seeing what the referral process looks like, seeing what patients go through for post-op follow-ups, like the whole thing. And I
Mm.
think that gave me a picture in my head as we were building the agency of really all of the things that we needed to be offering and doing to help support a practice and its growth.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. And I think that's a great point too for physicians. Like they often don't know how to market themselves. So I want to kind of get your take on that. When you kind of step into the equation with these physicians, where are they? Are they at a point where they are like, okay, you know what, I think we need to expand our network? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the physician. I think a lot of them are in kind of different parts of that. I think early on when physicians start practices, even kind of what I was talking about on the physician referral side, it's very peer-to-peer. So they've got the relationships that they've built over the years, and then they're the ones, because their book of business, so to speak, is not full, are going out and building relationships. But naturally, as you get busier as a physician, your business starts to grow, you start seeing more patients. All of your time really should be focused on patient point of care, improving outcomes, all of that stuff. So the marketing just naturally falls to the wayside. So
Yeah.
I think that there's kind of this taper off effect. Like you grow, you get a little busier, and then you just kind of stay there.
Mm.
And so the marketing kind of almost gets sight unseen forgotten. I know we're going to talk about kind of the effects of COVID a little. I think that that's hit everyone really hard. All of a sudden, there's a realization that I have to be reaching people online. So I
Mm.
think that there's that side. I think the other side that's interesting too is we call them gray hair physicians, but essentially physicians that have been practicing for like 20, 25, 30 years.
Mm.
So they've got a pretty solid book of business, so they're well known in the community in terms of referrals. What they're seeing now is with the verticalization of healthcare, like healthcare systems buying up practices, or these large conglomerated private practices, like these mega orthopedic practices or these mega PE backed or venture capital backed, like dermatology groups, those DSOs in the dental side, they're all of a sudden showing up in your neighborhood and then sucking all the referrals out of the room. And
Yeah.
then you're like, well, I used to be booked out for 3 months, so why would I care about marketing my practice? And then all of a sudden half your referrals are gone and you're like scrambling to figure out like, oh my goodness, how do I market my practice? I've ignored this. years.
It's something that they probably don't even think about until it's, like, almost too late in the equation for them to address these concerns. Like,
For sure.
when I think of physicians too, I don't necessarily think of them having to worry about marketing. So
And and they used to not have to. I think between COVID and then just the natural kind of progression and probably regression, as a lot of physicians would consider it, of the healthcare system in the United States is before you had insurance with low deductibles. So you'd see like you'd max your deductible out by the summer and then you'd have essentially free healthcare for the rest of the year. We'd see these huge surges in our surgical practices in the late third and fourth quarters because everyone's getting like all of their procedures done and
mm,
their caths put in and all of this stuff, and really all of that's gone out the window and everyone's pretty much forking out money out of their own pocket. So now they're more focused on physician reputation, their point of care, how digitally integrated they are. Do they offer telemedicine? Do they offer patient portals? Like all of this stuff. Are they a thought leader? Like, are they the trusted person in this specialty or this space? And none of that mattered before. Like, you got a referral from your PCP, your primary care provider, and you just went to a doctor that you knew it was going to be covered well by your insurance. And now it's just a whole wild, wild west. So now you've got patients taking their healthcare back. And so you need to go out and kind of differentiate yourself.
yeah, and I'm sure it can be super overwhelming for them as well because they don't have that experience. It's not something that they probably have ever even really addressed or thought about it. And then all of a sudden, it's just, like you said, it's chaos a little bit. And that's where I think you guys do such an excellent job is that you guys really, really know healthcare. And I think that's what kind of differentiates you guys in that healthcare marketing agency space because you know what you're talking about. And I think doctors really, really respect that. So let's go back to COVID a little bit and talk about that. How did you see COVID affecting your agency and then the physicians that you're helping?
Yeah. So that, I mean, it was obviously, um, uh, like everyone dealt with it pretty immediately and fast over the first initial like shutdown weeks. There are so many unknowns. I think for us, it was a really mixed bag, and I think that the same is true for the provider side because we deal with so many different surgical and non-surgical, as well as even kind of elective like aesthetics practices. So that it was a wide ranging effect. Like after we got past the like mandatory lockdowns and things started opening back up in terms of essential, there's a lot of things like ortho groups and a lot of those that kind of went back to somewhat of a business as usual. They had to obviously start leveraging pretty immediately telehealth for pretty much everything outside of their surgeries. But
Mm,
then we had other practices that were just like shut down. I mean, they were shut down for months. And
mhm,
so they had their hands tied. There wasn't much that they could do. So we were working on trying to pivot them to adopt telehealth and get it up on their website and get it integrated into their patients and improve patient retention and ease the onboarding stress for the baby boomer population, those kind of things. So it was interesting. There was like a definite like what's going to happen moment, and then it seemed to kind of level out for us, and we were really fortunate to finish the year really strong. On the practice side, I think the same thing was said. I think there was a lot of unknown, but I think the thing that we've seen over the kind of last 9 months of 2020 is I think a realization as the practices opened up their doors again, just how critical it was to get much more digitally integrated in terms of how we're marketing chat features on your website, how patients are booking telehealth appointments, how we're using email communication to the best of our ability for patient retention and engagement, like all of these things. And I think it's been fun for us because it's been things we've been talking about for years. Um, I think it's been a little bit painful for some practices to try to get to adjust, but
yeah.
I think I think all in all, it'll be for the betterment of both on the patient side and the patient care side, as well as what will come out of it in terms of the practices getting more integrated from a digital standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's growing pains. It's like
Yeah,
we're
it
almost
is. It
to the
is.
promised land a little bit, but it will be worth it, I think, for
It just took something that was going to take like 5 to 10 years to come on board and made it all happen in like 3 months. So
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
that was pretty wild. It's like imagine like when the ACA stuff happened and like mandatory EMRs, like hospitals are still transitioning to EMRs and it's been well over 10 years. Imagine if all that had to happen in 6 months. So
Oh.
it's kind of what happened with it with the telehealth explosion.
Yes, seriously, on top of having to deal with this worldwide pandemic. Oh my gosh, it's a lot. So
For
going
sure.
off of that, what are kind of the top three things that you recommend that practices start doing to stay relevant?
I think first and foremost, and it obviously varies a little bit by your specialty, but I think most things hold fairly true. It's just kind of in the positioning of your messaging, what platforms that you're using. But I mean, it's kind of my first love as far as starting our agency and a lot that I speak and focus on. But I think search rankings and SEO, if you've heard that term, search engine optimization, I think that, and there's a lot of things to unpack inside of that, but I think that's probably the most important thing to think about long term. The best thing to invest in long term, paid ads, which I'm going to talk about, is one of the three, but there's always an unknown with paid ads. Like all the
Mm,
platforms have to continue to monetize and maximize shareholder wealth. Ads are inherently going to continue to get more expensive. There's going to be more competition that continues to flood into those. So I think from a long-term approach standpoint, the most important thing is to think about how in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, am I putting content and investing in my site? So I'm positioning us to rank really highly in local search results when patients are looking for the treatments and the conditions and the problems that I solve.
mm,
And it's not something that happens overnight. So it's something that you want to be proactive about, but I think investing in that. So whether you're an orthopedic surgeon that focuses on hand and you want to rank for hand surgeon near me, or you're a dermatologist that wants to do tons of skin cancer screenings in your area because that's the way you get patients through the door, ranking number one for that stuff, both in map results and Google My Business, as well as organically, is just, it opens up the world for what else you can do. You can retarget those patients. You can focus on conversion optimization on your site. So that's always where I recommend starting. And then I'd say after that, probably the second most important thing is content development.
mm,
And I think most important inside of content development is video content and getting the physicians involved in that. I think we've talked a lot about how patients today already are taking their health journey back. They're going online, they're using telehealth, they're doing all of these things in a digital ecosystem. And with that, I think has come the need and want for education and to hear from providers. And the best medium to do that with is video. So
mm.
I think as a provider, looking at how can I start producing some video content that lives on my site that helps educate patients, answer common FAQs, as well as create kind of a know, like, and trust relationship, as I call it,
Yeah.
before the provider walks through or before the patient walks through the door to see a provider, I think is really important. And then probably the third of the top three is paid advertising. That's a whole world. There's so many platforms that are out there now, but
Mm,
I think with that, it creates a lot of ability to get super targeted in who you're getting in front of based on how problem aware they are. Are they solution driven? Are they cost driven? Like, so I think it all kind of working backwards in terms of getting the most out of your paid advertising, if you really dumb it down, is building patient personas. So understand who your patient is. I think most doctors assume they do, but they've never sat down and put like Susie Q and John Smith and what do they do? What are their activities? What are their hobbies? What social platforms do they hang out? And if you do that and then understand the solutions that you're offering in terms of surgeries or devices, understanding where the patient is as far as, are they aware of the problem but they don't know that you have the solution, or maybe they're aware of both. Like, say cool sculpting or something. So you're just trying to get in front of everyone else.
Yeah.
And so understanding, I think those two things, then you can go down the whole rabbit hole of what platform should I advertise on? How much should my budget be? All that stuff. But all those questions get answered, I think, by answering who is my patient and where are they in the sales funnel? Then
Yeah.
you can answer the rest of the stuff of which platform is best and how much you want to spend on them.
Yeah. So interesting that you mentioned that patient health, kind of patient engagement side of things, getting to know your audience and getting to know your patients even before they walk through the door. Because on our side of things, virtual assistant side of things,
Yep.
we are seeing the same thing. A lot of our doctors are coming to us because their patients are struggling with the interaction with the physician. So
Yep.
they're nervous to go back in person, right? Because obviously COVID, pandemic, and the younger generation coming into play is so focused on that relational aspect. So when our VAs are presented like on an iPad or a TV stand, it makes them feel like, oh my gosh, there's a live person, right? That I can talk to. They can check me in. They can make sure that I'm all ready to go so that when the doctor comes in, it's just me and the doctor. The doctor can look right at me, address my needs, and he's not just sitting in front of a computer typing. So it's very
Yep.
curious
Yeah.
that even physicians could start that process even before the patient comes in. I love that idea of getting them connected and familiar with what their practice is all about even before they step foot into the office, which is such an interesting concept. It's like you said, it's something that doctors would never have even thought about, 20, 30 years ago, but
Oh
now it
yeah.
is
Sure.
very relevant to our culture in this generation that's coming up. So, kind of going back into the VA side of things, how do you see virtual assistants stepping kind of into this space in terms of increasing patient engagement and increasing marketing opportunities for the physicians? Where do you see VAs coming into play?
For sure. I mean, we love VAs. I think one of the big problems, and you and I had talked about this in some length, is I think their physicians can be kind of blissfully unaware of kind of how overloaded the front staff usually is in a normal practice ecosystem, and just assume that the patients kind of like don't care or everything is fine. It'll kind of work itself out. And I think VAs, there's a huge role. There's multiple different roles, but I know from looking at it from the marketing standpoint, is a lot of times when we come in and we start executing on a growth strategy, it immediately starts causing front desk issues because you've taken what's already a really busy and overwhelmed front desk dealing with all of the patient inquiries, the patient appointment stuff, the medication refills, like all the stuff they're dealing with day in and day out, and then adding 20 to 50% more calls or lead appointments or whatever it is on top of that. And it's like, how are they supposed to handle that influx? So I think a VA, because we've seen uh, programs not be near as effective when there's not somebody dedicated to the success of the program in-house in terms of like handling the sales calls, getting the appointments booked, proactively following up. Like we can do some of that through marketing automation and through a CRM, but nothing beats the human touch. At the
Yeah,
end of the day, patients want that human touch. And so you can greatly maximize the return on ad spend, the return on your campaigns, the return on your investment by having somebody in-house such as a VA that's saying, okay, these are the campaigns that we're building. These are the types of leads that should be coming in. This is what the sales process needs to look like. We can record some of those conversations and continue to work on them and fine tune them, but having somebody really focused on the success of the marketing program is absolutely massive, because then we know we can go out and we can focus on growth without worrying about the ball getting dropped, like lead forms not being followed up with, or people not being called in a timely manner or getting followed up with, all of that kind of stuff. So just that right there, outside of all of the other stuff that a VA can do for a practice, from my end, is absolutely massive. especially for
Mhm.
the cost that it takes to get a VA involved in the practice. It's just a huge upside in terms of getting more out of what you're going to be investing into your marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure at that point physicians are already overwhelmed. They come to you guys, they really need help with their marketing, getting patients in the door. But like you said, how are they handling that in-house? And you're right, you don't want the physicians to be more burdened than they already are. That you don't want to have them, spend more time charting or doing the back end
Yep.
tasks. And I see that as well. I really see that being a value add, when there's a VA who you can hire for very affordable cost, who can come in and assist you with those tasks. And it's just fascinating to me. The more I learn and I'm kind of immersed in the healthcare industry, it is a huge problem that physicians are just overwhelmed. There's a ton on their plate, especially with our kind of target audience. It's just a lot for them to handle.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and we actually recently had somebody on our podcast. His name is Dr. Brent Lacey, and he's a gastroenterologist, but he's a practicing gastroenterologist, but he does a lot of one-on-one consulting with physicians to develop a financial freedom, but prevent burnout, because suicide rates, burnout rates, they're unfortunately incredibly high in the field, especially as you get more into the surgical level of physician, but just physicians in general, because there's way too much on their plate. And so I think it's really important to be able to balance work life as well as avoid physician burnout, by trying to offload as much of the managerial stuff, or the things that are kind of required to stay compliant, like the note taking, the coding inside of your EMR, all of that stuff. And using a VA can be a really effective way to continue to get your practice busier, like you want it to be, like when what our goal is in a marketing effort, without just looking ahead and feeling like it's doomsday. As I get busier, I'm just going to get more and more overwhelmed, and then I'm going to have to hire more and more people, and that's not necessarily the path that you need to go down.
Yeah, I completely agree. Physician burnout, I think, is kind of like an overused term. I've heard
For
that
sure, it definitely
some,
is.
physicians are like, oh, physician burnout, whatever. I just spoke to a doctor last week who said, you know what, I never thought physician burnout was like a real thing. I've been a physician for years and years and years. And then it happened to him. He totally hit a wall. And he said it was like such an eye opening kind of experience for him to be at that point where he was like, whoa, like this is way, way, way too much. It's real. And it took him like a couple months to kind of,
Yeah,
recover and say, reevaluate and say, okay, I can't keep doing this. So now we've been talking to him about our VA services because it just makes sense. But there's some hesitation there, I think, too, because it is such a new concept in the healthcare industry,
for
um,
sure.
that people are just a little hesitant on how this would work. But I mean, with COVID, like you said, telehealth, telemedicine exploding, people are getting more and more comfortable, with the idea of it. So,
And I think things like these new concepts, like leveraging VAs, are things that physicians need to be proactively thinking about. Because the unfortunate thing is, and history has proved it, is it's more than likely not going to get better. Like all of a sudden, like there's going to be less IDC codes, and there's going to be unraveling of healthcare red tape, and all of a sudden you're going to get higher reimbursements from insurance. Just
mhm,
all of that stuff's probably just going to continue to get squeezed more and more and more and more. So
yeah.
then you have to start thinking of creative ways to like add ancillary products, get more
Mhm.
time on your plate so you can focus on patient care, like all of these different things so you can become more profitable. You can also avoid physician burnout. You can get some of your time back, all of those different things. And things like a VA, using VAs are some, I wouldn't even call them out of the box. They're just newer things that you can look at doing that can be a great alleviator of stress and make your practice more productive, improve patient care, all of the stuff that physicians care about.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Same thing with marketing too. You don't want to get to that point where it's overwhelming, to be proactive and take the steps that are necessary so
Yeah.
that it can be a smooth transition. So,
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, kind of what are the trends that you're seeing in this industry? What should physicians be aware of, and how does that kind of apply to what we've been talking about?
For sure. I think one of the most interesting, one of the biggest is I think that there's been a transition as social media and the consumerization of healthcare and all of that has come online, comboed with a transition in the marketplace of a lot of the 20 to 30 year physicians starting to retire, kind of the
Mm,
baby boomer generation, and a younger, more tech savvy group coming out of fellowship and starting to take over like the main partnerships and heads of boards and practices and stuff. You're seeing, I think, a lot of them more concerned about their personal brand, their legacy, and their thought leadership on an individual level, both with, I think, a lot of the ecosystem of providers that you have this, I think, vision of the 50s, 60s healthcare model where you're going to come out, you'll become independently wealthy, you'll have a private practice, you'll get tons of time with your patient base. And then none of that happens and you get out of fellowship, you have a large mounting debt, and a hospital puts a contract on your table and you sign it. And all of a sudden you're employed by a large hospital system and you have no voice. And
mhm,
they want to really build their own voice, their own autonomy, build their own tribe, whether it's peer to peer with colleagues or it's building an engaged patient base. And I think that, plus even the physicians in private practices, really want to do the same too, and they want to become kind of the go-to and the thought leader in their specialty, in their space. And that's been the most interesting, is how kind of willing and ready, in combo with patients consuming more content online, physicians wanting to build that content for them,
mhm,
and there really is an audience for every subspecialty. Like we have a client that focuses in like mainly infectious disease immunodeficiency stuff, and he's got tens of thousands of readers, a massive social following, and he has people literally flying in from all over the world to
wow,
get diagnosed with like lupus or CVID or Lyme's disease, all this stuff. And so it's like, if somebody like that can build an audience and a tribe and a following, then anyone in any specialty can build a voice and a legacy and a brand. And I think that that's probably been the biggest trend that we've seen in the conversations that we're having with physicians. I'd say another one is going live. That kind of piggybacks off that, is we've seen like Facebook lives, YouTube lives, that kind of stuff in the pursuit of building an engaged patient audience, really become super effective ways to, again, like what we've been talking about, build that know, like, and trust relationship with patients before they walk through the door.
mhm,
And lives are a really great way to grow your social audience. They tend to have a bigger reach than your organic posts do, and you can market and advertise them prior to the live. So I think that that's been really effective. And then the last thing, which I think is maybe a little off the wall conceptually, but I think it's going to really start taking more shape, is course development and selling courses. I think when COVID happened, a lot of people realized how disengaged they were from their patient base, and that they didn't have another offering really except for patients walking through the door for surgeries or something. So I think if you can create like a health and wellness ecosystem and a course, there's a whole nother kind of revenue stream that you can build out both for yourself and your practice, that I think is going to continue to grow in the digital age. So I think those are the big trends that I've really been seeing as of late. And again, going back to the VA thing, I think a lot of those, both growing your personal brand, um, getting engagement, as well as building something like a course, can all be used. A VA can be used in great effectiveness inside of all of those, because again, all of that stuff that I just mentioned takes a tremendous amount of time. And
yeah.
so getting a VA involved can allow you to do more of those things that I think will fulfill you more and you'll enjoy a lot without stretching yourself too thin.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Justin. This has just been such an honor to have you on our podcast. And for any of you who are listening, if you need any help with your marketing, Justin is your go to guy. Him and his wife have been phenomenal just in their footprint in the healthcare industry. They're really just setting the bar to take your marketing to the next level. So, thank you, Justin, so much. And we'll have you on and hopefully your wife again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and go connect with me on LinkedIn, Justin Knott, Knott, and visit us at Intrepy, Intrepy.com.
Perfect. Awesome.